This is Sunnee Serotonin. Joining us is,
Dr. Gregory Nawalnic, clinical psychologist.
as an introduction, what made you choose your profession?
There were a lot of things. I was somebody that really enjoyed kind of watching people do things and wondering why they did what they did. And so I found psychology. I had an intro to psych course as a core requirement in college. And it was the first class that I had that really I felt spoke to me and that I enjoyed. It was interesting. And so it was kind of an easy path. All the schooling aside, it was an easy choice to make.
What are the subtle early warning signs of suicide that friends or family might miss?
So those can be very personal changes. So things that we look at generally would be like somebody stops doing things with people or activities that they enjoy. They start to pull back. You can see isolation. Some of the bigger warning signs around suicide that somebody might miss or mistake is you'll see people, their mood, if they've been depressed for a while and you've noticed that they're just kind of off, their mood might lighten a little bit. And that can be very surprising for people to hear because you think, oh, they're doing better. But in reality, it's a scary sign because if they've not been in treatment or not been making any major changes and they're just suddenly feeling better, a lot of times it can signal that they've got a plan and that in their mind, the suffering is about to end. And so you may notice them giving away belongings, and so if somebody just starts giving you stuff that is really important to them, that's a major warning sign. But some of the early ones are really just, sadness, tearfulness, starting to pull back, not enjoying things they used to. Those are the ones that we really want people to keep an eye out for.
What are the risk factors of suicide?
So again, there can be a wide range. Depending on your age and where you are in development, the developmental span of life. Um, for kids and adolescents, there can be major social factors, different feelings of alienation, bullying can be real risk factors. Um, as you start to get older, different major life events, divorce, losing a job. These are things that, and even moves, if somebody has to move from one place to another, uprooting from their social system, losing someone that they know or love to suicide can also be a real trigger. And also substance abuse. Substance abuse is a really big risk factor because sometimes that battle with addiction starts to feel, if somebody's tried to quit something a lot of times and just not able to get over that hump, they start to feel that it'd be better to be dead than to continue this battle. So those are some major risk factors.
How do you safely approach someone you suspect is struggling without making them feel interrogated?
So there's there's no wrong way to approach someone. The only wrong way is to just think, I'll just leave them alone. They'll figure it out. When we engage someone around the question of suicide, what that does is communicate caring. And so the more that we can say, the more that we can support, the more positives we can reflect. A lot of times you're working against the depressed individual's internal dialogue and thoughts which basically say nobody cares about you. They'd be better off without you. Just go ahead and do it. And so engaging them and saying like, hey, you've seemed off. How are you doing? They say, all fine. You say, come on, I know better. Talk to me. So it's not that they're going to feel interrogated. Um, and if you feel like you're prying, you know, I think err on the side of caution and engage. And if anything, say, look, I'm sorry if I'm overstepping, but I want to communicate to you that I care and that I notice and that I just want to make sure you're okay.
Is it true that asking directly about suicide can put the idea in someone's head?
No, that's one of the biggest risks, I mean, myths out there of suicide is that asking them about it is going to give them the idea. The fact is that when somebody gets to the point of a suicidal attempt, they've had the thought hundreds, thousands of times. It's not something that just one day pops up. And if you happen to ask them, hey, are you thinking about suicide? That they're like, you know what? I wasn't, but now that you've said that, yeah, absolutely. God, I wish you'd never said that. No, I mean, when someone is deeply, deeply depressed, this thought is on a loop so commonly and so frequently that asking about it is actually something that can be really relieving for them because they desperately oftentimes want to talk about it, but they don't know how to bring it up because they're afraid of the reaction. So for you saying, you may notice sometimes they almost start, a little bit at it. Um, but recognizing that you're actually opening a door for them to sort of unleash all these thoughts and feelings that they've had. They might feel safer, supported, and they may really break down in that moment because it's so important and powerful for them. So, absolutely use the word, talk about it, because even asking, sometimes people say, well, are you thinking about hurting yourself? And that's a trap door because if someone's really suicidal, the means that they pick, they might have picked because it won't hurt a bit in their mind. And so they can honestly answer and say, no, I'm not thinking about hurting myself, but they are thinking about killing themselves. And so we have to use the language, we have to go right to it because otherwise we might let it slip away with this sort of twisted ideation that they have. And so, no, absolutely, you cannot plant the idea in someone's head. Suffice to say. Sorry, it was a long one there.
Um, what are the protective factors of suicide? So what can people consistently do to lower suicidal ideation?
So number one, it's going to look like getting up, pushing through the depression, keep engaging, keep doing stuff. And that is a superhuman, it takes such strength to do that. But if we think of depression as almost like a parasite, that once we get it, it starts to twist us and what we do and how we do what we do. Um, that's what leads people to isolate and pull back and withdraw. And when you're isolating and pulling back and not getting out around friends or family, not going to school, not going to work, there's no space for anything but more depressive thoughts. And so you want to be making sure you're getting around people and you're doing things because then that gives opportunities for other information to come. And the more that we do, the better our self-esteem can become because we notice, like, hey, I checked that box. I did that thing. I showed up. So, protective factors are going to look like loving, connection, support, activity, engagement in your life, positive self-talk, sort of that mindset, it gets better, especially for adolescents, because at 17 or 18, some of these problems that are just transient, there are things that they're here now, but in a year, you look back and be like, I was thinking about dying over that. Like, come on. So recognizing that, hey, there is something to these videos saying it gets better, it gets better. Give yourself that chance and give yourself hope and positivity. And so the more hope someone has, the more connections they have, the more things they're doing, the better off that they'll be.
Yeah, and I think something that's really important that people also need to recognize is that they're not alone in their struggles. And because of a previous attempt, they're not any less or any better of a person.
No, absolutely not. I mean, I use in therapy a lot the idea that if you've ever attempted suicide and survived, you're in sort of a bonus round. So a lot of the things that you might have been afraid of before or anxious about, it's like, what do you have to fear now? Like you've been at that precipice, you've been at the edge. Push beyond now. What do you have to lose? Because a lot of times when we get worried or anxious or depressed, we stop doing things because we're afraid of what someone else might think. And the reality is we have to live and show up for ourselves first. It's like the FAA says, put your oxygen mask on before trying to help anybody else. So let's make sure that we're giving ourselves every opportunity. If we aren't being kind to ourselves, we can't expect anybody else to be kind to us. So believe in yourself, trust yourself, push yourself, and every day is an opportunity to learn, grow, or develop in some way. And every time you do that, you wake up better the next day.